And our fourth one, and there are many more, is feminist criticism, which really came to the forefront in the 1960s. Feminist theory, sure, common to you now. Feminism is interested in how texts reveal inherently patriarchal or male-dominated perspectives. It can be traced all the way back to Mary Shelley in the 1700s, but feminist criticism is really concerned with those forms of marginalization and the exclusion of women from cultural industries, politics, business, art, literature, science. We see a real resurgence just in the last year or so in a new awakening of a new feminism. And it's a very exciting time, and inroads are being made in all kinds of ways of raising awareness about feminist theories and feminist perspectives. So that is a very exciting development. There are many, many more orientations, other orientations. We can look at indigenous orientations. We can look at race orientations and looking at text through those lenses. And each time we employ a lens, then we are able to draw out different layers of meaning. And that's what's really exciting about the cultural studies. So let's take a look at some of the larger concepts in cultural studies. Some of the terms that are most prevalent when we're reading this kind of work. And what we'll use, we'll come back to our friend Bruno Mars again, and we'll use a very popular video to show some of these terms at work. So first and foremost, we said that cultural studies is interdisciplinary. Critiquing and analyzing a text or layers of meaning, drawing on a number of theoretical lenses, not just one. So we can use many different lenses on any particular piece of literature, a film, any kind of a cultural construct, cultural artifact that we want. So if we take the song on the video, Uptown Funk, I just chose it randomly. It's a piece of popular art, a song and a video with lyrics. It can be analyzed from a number of different perspectives. If you want to take a look at the video, I can't embed it here because of copyright issues, but you can go to YouTube, watch the video, watch the images, see if you can stop yourself from dancing. That'll be tough, but you can have a look, and then we'll run through some of these main terms to show how each of these lenses brings back a particular layer of meaning. For example, if we watch the video and we use a feminist perspective, the portrayal of women, their role in the video, how they're represented, these speak to larger issues. A Marxist lens would reveal the preoccupation with class and money and consumerism. You watch the video for those kinds of images and that kind of meaning coming through. The juxtaposition of them hood girls with references to the trappings of wealth and consumer brands. Critical race theory, another lens, may look closely at African American, Hispanic representation, influences on language and music, visual images, while gender theory and queer theory may take up the sexual ambiguity of the singer and those normative identities and structures. Whew, that's some serious analysis, or as Bruno would say, hot damn. So we're going to look at other theories. We're going to look at other terms as we move forward and just use that same video to pinpoint what they might mean in relation to a cultural artifact. Cultural theorists and cultural theory love to talk about critical theory. And critical theory is a theory that critiques specifically human behavior and the culture at large. Cultural studies draws from multidisciplines to explore cultural texts, as we said, politics and ideologies, understanding, for example, the phenomenon that is Donald Trump. Steve Bannon, the rise of white nationalism and fascism has breathed new life into critical theory. And it really started at the turn of the 20th century. It was promoted by Marxist scholars. We mentioned Marx already. The Frankfurt School of philosophy in Germany at the time, in the 1930s and 40s, really brought critical theory to the forefront. Critical theorists talk a lot about identity and representation. And you'll see that word used a lot when talking about cultural studies. Our first two individuals or groups being represented within a cultural text, we think of Uptown Funk again, with characters as represented or underrepresented, people who may be misrepresented, stereotypical. So critical theories talk a lot about representation. So you get the idea of how that might work when talking about a cultural artifact or a piece of art. Identity culture is made up of people. People are made up of different shapes, sizes, genders, colors, creeds, different identities. Identity can refer to groups, such as a political identity, a movement like the Civil Rights Movement, the Me Too movement, Idle No More, feminism, gay pride. These are all group identities, but there's also individual identity. And people cannot be forced into boxes quite so easily. Another term that's very, very popular with cultural theorists and those in cultural study is the term hegemony. Academics love to use this word, and it refers to the dominant forms of social power and the ways they operate. So the dominant forms of social power. The concept captures how groups keep themselves in a place of power and privilege. Media, cultural images are often used to reinforce message about who is more valued, who has the right to speak and be listened to. Hegemony. The next one is consumption. And consumption is particularly relevant for environment sustainability studies. And cultural studies asks, are consumer goods merely objects, or can people transform them into something more meaningful? So we think of Bruno again, and his references to his Chucks and his Saint Laurent. We ask, do the objects have more power than people? And what do they represent? And the final one from our list of just some examples is marginalization. And that really looks at who is being pushed to the sidelines in favor of hegemony, those in power, those with privilege, full rights, and seemingly all the benefits in a society. So cultural studies is interested in those relegated to the sidelines. So there, that's a brief 7-slide run through cultural studies, critical theory, social theory, that huge area that's dominated criticism and critique and interpretation in the last century or so. It's evolving and changing, as we said, as society evolves and changes. We've also seen that each of those lenses brings back a different layer of meaning. The lens that we are interested in this course, is something called eco-criticism. We're going to be looking at what is it? What comes back to us when we start looking at our cultural artifacts? We start looking at novels, plays, television shows, music videos, magazine articles, advertisements, art, you name it, through the lens of eco-criticism. Criticism that takes into consideration the larger living world. Cultural studies has been criticized, pardon the pun, for being anthropocentric, so human-centered that it forgets the larger living world, the biosphere, the ecosphere in which we live. Eco-critics, a number of years ago, as we'll see, about 30 years ago, said, hey, wait a minute. Let's open this up. What comes back to us? What meanings come back to us when we start looking at our cultural artifacts, how we reflect ourselves back to ourselves by looking at it with an eco-critical lens. So that's where we'll be going in our next session.